Hello Year 11 and welcome back. This lesson here is for Monday the 23rd of November, right, those of you working at home. But we are looking at writing up question 2. Last Thursday we looked through question 1 and we still planned our answers to question 2. Today we're focusing on writing up those answers, okay? Once again to question 2, all right? So just to go back through some information, remember by the end of this sequence of lessons, so by the time we'd gone through these 4 questions for the first time, I wanted you to understand how to approach each question and be able to collectively build answers to each question. We're still working on this a bit more as a team, okay? We're kind of going back to the beginning where I give you as much support as I can going through each question, and as time goes on and we repeat the process over and over, you will become more independent. So I am going to identify how many marks now at the start of this, so you can kind of see what sort of level we are aiming for, right? I would like you to all to be aiming somewhere within this range, all right? I know a lot of you will be pushing towards those top marks, but I thought I'd let you know just what is involved in each range of the mark scheme. Remember, this question is worth a maximum of 8 marks. It's an 8-mark question, question 2. So in order to earn 5 to 6 marks within this question, you need to show clear synthesis and interpretation of both texts. Once again, using that word clear that always tends to come in with a level 3 answer. You should make clear inferences from both texts. You should select clear references and textual detail relevant to the focus of the question, and statements should show clear differences between the texts. Remember, you're writing a summary of the differences between Aberfan and London. But if you're pushing for 7 to 8 marks, you need to show perceptive synthesis and interpretation of both texts. All right, you need to make perceptive inferences from both texts, make judicious references and use of textual detail relevant to the focus of the question, and your statement should show perceptive differences. Okay, this is where my comment from before about integrating the both sources within your answer rather than just discussing one and then the other will come in handy, because it will let you to make those inferences and make show those perceptive differences between the two. Okay, you kind of bounce the sources off of each other. So how can you earn your marks? We're going to take this approach. A good way to think about how you can earn your marks might be the following. We're still following that what, how, why structure that we followed before in paper 1. However, I'm just going to change how we look at these slightly a little bit to help us build our answers a bit more clearly. So with what, how, why, we're also going to look at statement, quotation, inference. Your what is your statement, your how is your quotation, your evidence, and your why is the inference that you can make based on that quotation, okay? Stretching out that inference, what does that quotation reveal? So I've kind of got it, there's what, how, why, SQI. So you ever hear me refer to SQI? I'm referring to statement, quotation, inference. What, how, why, SQI, okay? So that's kind of the structure we're going to take in our writing. Top tip there, as I've said, the answers that get top marks switch between the 2 sources when comparing rather than just discussing one and then the other, all right? Again, you can kind of bounce the sources off of each other in your writing. And still playing on that, how can I earn my marks? I'm going to aim to follow this paragraph structure, okay? As we're aware, this is an 8-mark question. I have 8 things on the board, okay? We're looking at that statement, quotation, SQI structure with our writing. And we could perhaps frame our writing like this to aim for maximum marks. And by including all of these things that I've got on the list here, we should hopefully be aiming for those top mark questions. I will put in a disclaimer and say by following this pattern, I'm not going to guarantee you 8 marks, right? You have a better chance of getting up there. It's more about how you write it and what you're saying, okay? But if you're able to follow this structure, it should hopefully help lead you towards a point where you are hitting those top marks, okay? Because of the way it's structured, it gets you to do certain things. So point 1 though, I don't want to say sentence 1 because it doesn't just have to be 1 sentence or anything like that. I've got 1 there, source A, we're looking for a statement and a quotation. All right, that, if we aim for that, that should hopefully get you around 1 mark. So source A, inference, okay? That's when we then make an inference about our quotation. So statement and quotation come together and then inference. That could potentially earn you your 2nd mark, all right? This is kind of the way we're looking at it. If you include 1 statement of quotation and 1 inference, you're likely looking around 2 marks-ish there. And then we repeat that 3 times over, flipping between source A and source B. So that was source A, SQ and I, and then source B, SQ, inference, source A, SQ, inference, source B, SQ, and inference, as I've got on there, okay? 8 things. If we aim to structure our writing in that way, we should be looking towards the top marks, okay? So it's 2 paragraphs essentially, 8 marks, 2 paragraphs explaining what's going on, comparing both source A and source B. So in first paragraph, we'll talk about source A, then source B, and then repeat for the second paragraph. I have put that they don't necessarily need to be in this exact order. Sometimes it makes sense to kind of do your source A statement and quotation, and then your source B statement and quotation kind of together. All right, because you could, in a sentence, you might say, oh, Aberfan is described like this in comparison to London, which is described like this. You can then go on to make your inferences, but just make sure you're still interweaving those references between source A and source B. Let's just put that knowledge to the test a little bit. I have put an example paragraph on the board, just taking what we know about the order perhaps that we can look at putting our writing in with an aim to hitting the top marks. I'm going to pop this on the board, or pop this on the screen, and I want you to tell me if it matches up to that top mark criteria that we have looked at, especially with our knowledge that ideally we should be following this sort of structure where we move in between both sources. So I'll read through it, give it a pause, and then you can have a look and have a think, and then I will go on to explain. So is this a top mark answer? Aberfan is a small village. At its heart was the coal pit, and it seems like a harsh place to live and work. The railway tracks are decaying and there is grime over roofs and gardens. On the other hand, London is a colossal city and has a great river, so it seems more vibrant. It seems fair to imply that London is noisy, with trains at full speed and the constant rumble of industrial activity. It differs not just in size, but in what it would be like to live there. The impression being that, despite all its noise and fog, it is less harsh than Aberfan, not least because of its well-built houses. Okay, so that paragraph absolutely makes sense. All right, you know, it's grammar, it's spag, it's fine. Everything flows. However, is this a top mark answer is my question to you, as I've already said. So thinking about what we looked at with the mark scheme there and the structure that we talked about pushing towards a top mark answer. Pause the video, have a look again if you need to, and decide to yourself, is this a top mark answer? Pause the video, I'll carry on in a moment. Okay, hopefully by now you've managed to have a look again at that paragraph, maybe had a look back at the mark scheme as well as the structure suggestion that I gave you on the previous slide. Hopefully you've identified that although this paragraph is written well, it does compare the 2 different places, both Aberfan and London. I can tell you this is not a top mark answer. What I can tell you is this kind of answer would earn you around 5 to 6 marks. So it's in that level 3 band there, where it does show clear synthesis and interpretation of both texts, where it shows the clear differences between the texts, it selects clear references and textual detail, it makes inferences from both texts, but we need to be pushing ourselves up towards that perceptive level, okay? What it does feel a bit like in this one is it's just kind of relaying quotations. There's not as many inferences going on. We've got the little bit maybe, it seems fair to imply that London is noisy, with trains at full speed and the constant rumble, but there is so much more we could pull on in more detail to kind of draw those inferences out to show that we are having, or that we are showing that we can be perceptive in our interpretations, okay? What can we assume, what can we infer from the things that are on the screen, okay? Plus also it doesn't really go between the 2 sources as much as it could. It goes from Aberfan to London, and then you've got the statement at the end that refers to both London and Aberfan, or it links back to Aberfan at least. But again, we are aiming for that moving between the 2 sources, looking at our first paragraph, source A, then source B, second paragraph, source A, and then back to source B. Okay, again, making those comparisons, kind of bouncing each source off of each other to be perceptive. Okay, so just before we move on to the writing part, one thing I just want to look at is comparative discourse markers, okay? These are phrases or words you may use at the start of sentences just to signify what you're about to do in that paragraph or in that sentence. And I'll go into more detail on the next slide. Because remember, we are comparing in this paragraph, in this answer, we are comparing the differences between Aberfan and London, okay, and the ways that they are described. So what discourse markers could we use? Popping just a few there on the board, okay? I've put more than just comparison ones on the board there, all right? Because this will come in handy. I do have copies of these for you to pop in your books when you are back in to do so. But there are different categories of discourse markers. Again, they are words that signify what you're about to do in that paragraph or sentence. So you've got comparative discourse markers there, especially for when two things are alike, words like likewise, similarly, equally, compared to something, as with something. But the main one we're going to look at is the second column there, contrast, when two things are different, which are very much going to come in handy with this question, because we are comparing the differences between Aberfan and London. And we're looking at words such as alternatively, however, nevertheless, on the other hand, on the contrary, whereas, in contrast, otherwise, and conversely. All right, these are words that we could use within our writing, but as I said, I am going to give you this piece of paper because this will come in handy for when you're doing other pieces of writing. It's something you can refer back to go, oh, how can I start this sentence? How can I use a marker to structure my discourse, my writing? That's what I'm currently doing. So, question 2, let's write. What I've put on the screen here is a writing frame that should work with the plan that you do have to help you write a top mark answer, okay? Then we're going to use the information in our plan, which I have here on the next slide, same as what I talked about in the last video, same as what you should have from lesson last Thursday. I'm aware some of you may not have your books, hence why I've put it on the screen. Okay, so you can refer to that, but we are going to kind of write this as a class. What would be handy is if you did do this as a writing task as well, but again, I am going to do this as more of a model, just so that you can see how this information might be transferred into the writing frame that we have on the next slide. So, I'm going to pause the video for a second, just while I organise my screen. Okay, thank you for waiting there, Year 11. What I just tried to do is put both slides up on the screen there, just so you can see as I'm taking the information from the plan into the writing frame, okay? So question 2, let's write, okay? So in my starting sentence, I'm going, Aberfan is a something, all right? I'm not looking for a quotation here. Where I'm looking for quotations, the places where I have included quotation marks, all right? But this is an opportunity for me to show an inference about the town. All right, I'm going to take those words from that small summary section at the top of source A. I'm going to put Aberfan is a small village. We know that it's a small mining village in the south of Wales. Okay, but in an aim to integrate my quotations into my sentences, I'm then going to bring the quotes in straight away. And this is why I talk about kind of putting statement and quotations together in our writing. So I'm going to put Aberfan is a small village that... and I'm going to go with that second quotation we've got in our plan that few people have heard of. All right, so again, that just the story kind of summarises the place for itself. So I am going to make use of the quotations. I'm going to put it is, and this is where tucked away comes in. It is something in a Welsh valley. I'm going to say tucked away, using that other quotation from our plan just over here. Right, this suggests that it is what? This suggests that it is something. This is where this column over here comes in handy with our writing. What does this suggest or imply about the location? I'm looking at the column on the right hand side if you can't see my mouse. And this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm making my inference. This is where the inference comes in handy. I've done the first point of the structure I suggested. I've done my statement and my quotation. I'm now looking on to do my first inference. This suggests that it is, and again, these are just notes. So I am going to expand upon the ideas we do have there. So I'm going to play on the fact that it is hidden first, all right? This suggests, move that. This suggests that it is, I'm going to put almost hidden from view and may have been forgotten, or I'm going to expand it out, may have been forgotten in history. All right, again, coal mining, it's been a long time since coal mining was at its heyday. Okay, we already know that not a lot of people have heard of this place. Okay, so I'm just expanding these ideas. This suggests that it is almost hidden from view and may have been forgotten in history had it not been for the disaster. So what I've just made there is a perceptive inference, okay? It is a suggestion that I am taking from what I have read, okay? It may have been forgotten had it not been for the disaster. Something interesting to say about a place, okay? If I was writing this properly on paper, I would carry on the next section as part of the same paragraph, but for what we're doing on the screen, I won't. But if you were to carry on writing this in an exam, I would attach on the next sentence to that first bit. So now I'm going to switch to London. I'm going to switch to source B. And remember, first of all, I'm aiming to make that statement quotation pairing within the first part of this section. So I'm going to put in contrast, using one of those comparative, one of those contrasting discourse markers there, okay, to show that I'm going to look at a difference. In contrast, London is described as a, and I've got my quotation over here, colossal city. I'm just going to put colossal city in there. This implies that it is, okay? This is where, once again, we look to that right-hand side column. What does it imply? What does it suggest? That it is significant and large. All right, get rid of that, but then it is significant and large, semicolon. A place that is so large that, and again, referring to these comments, you wouldn't think a disaster could happen to it. That you wouldn't think a disaster could happen to it. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we've got a statement. London is described as a colossal city. I'm using my quotation there as part of my statement. Again, there's no harm in doing that. All right. I just need to make sure there are some of your own words in there. This implies, again, making that inference, it is significant and large, a place that is so large that you wouldn't think a disaster could happen to it. Wonderful. We have our statement, we have a quotation, we have our inference. And that is paragraph 1 done. We've done a statement and quotation for source A, and then an inference for source A. We've done a statement and quotation for source B, and then an inference for source B. So now we're going to move on to the next part, which is to flip back to source A. All right, but this is where my previous comment comes into play. We don't necessarily have to do it in the strict order that I gave out from the structure. You might decide to do your statement and quotation about source A and then source B before moving on to do the inference for both, which is okay. And that's what I'm going to do here. Just make that a little bit bigger. So I'm also going to put, whilst both have, what do both have running through them? Rivers. We've got it over here on the table, commenting on the river. So while they both also have rivers running through them, in Aberfan it is, and again, quotations come in handy there. I have put the quotation marks in there to signify this, okay? So in Aberfan it is as black as the Styx. And this is where I've done the statement and quotation about source A, and I'm now going to go on to do the same thing for source B. I'm going to put, which differs from London with its great river, okay? Great river, we've got over here at the end of that quotation. Then moving on, we're going to do the inferences for both now. It is implied that in Aberfan, the river's blackness comes from, all right, again, looking over there, to the right hand side, I'm going to put from the natural seeping coal, all right, because that's what's going into the river. We're then going to switch back to London, but with London it is, and I can go back to the quotation here, muddy and dull. All right, if the quotation has, or if the source describes it, sometimes it's useful to use it. It is muddy and dull because of, and again, look over to the table here, the right hand side, because of the man-made deliberate waste from the warehouses. All right, and I'm going to phrase that as such. Because of man-made waste from the many warehouses along its, that's the river's length. Beautiful. What we have there is a full question to answer. We have managed to do all of the things I set out to do in the structure. Just to recap, I will go through this again. So first of all, here we have our statement. Oh, no, go back. Yep. Undo. There we go. All right. In this first sentence here, we have our statement and our quotation. We then go into the second sentence. We have our inference. Those are both based on source A. We then have in contrast, and we have our statement and quotation for source B. We then have our inference for source B in this last sentence of this paragraph. Moving on to the second paragraph, we then have our statement and quotation for source A. We then follow on with our statement and quotation from source B, which differs from London with its great river. Okay, we then do our inference for source A. It is implied that in Aberfan, the river's blackness comes from the natural seeping coal, but with London, we then switch to make our inference for source be. Ta-da! We have done it. Okay, and I've just popped that in large again on the screen in case you wanted to see it in a bit more detail. Our full question to answer. I am going to end this lesson here because this is what we would have aimed to have achieved on Monday, the 23rd of November in English. We should have got to this point in the writing, okay? The next video goes on to talk about question 3, okay? And that the aim for doing that is on Tuesday. So for Tuesday's lesson, if you're working at home, please do refer to that. But for now, well done for sticking with me. All right, we do have a full question to answer between us, so that's good. But otherwise, look after yourselves, and hopefully you'll be back again for question 3 next time.